All right, Monday night, we're back in Dolan's Dugout with your host, Steve Dolan. I'm Ramon Scott with our regular guest, Adam Paul, and our very, very special guest. Steve, the news must be good as it's Monday and we're starting to do some normal things, and we've got the bearer of all good news, Karen Pearlman, mother of Chloe, most famous dog on everybody's Facebook timeline, Steve.
Yeah. Well, Ramon, you know what's funny? You and Adam and I, after the show each week, we talk about who's going to be on the next week, and sometimes we'll debate it. Last week, the name Karen Pearlman, San Diego Union-Tribune came up. Done. Karen Pearlman, San Diego Union-Tribune, most engaging person on Facebook with you and your best friend, Chloe. Karen, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you guys. Very excited to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, Karen, as you know, so many people read you in the San Diego Union-Tribune, but take us back a little bit. How did you get into journalism? I know you're an East County girl. Let us know how that all came about.
Okay, well, I'll give you the short version. I moved to San Diego from Illinois when I was 13, and I'd always wanted to be a sports writer since I was about 11. And went to Patrick Henry High School after Pershing Junior High, and got into journalism when I was in high school. Went to San Diego State, was on the Daily Aztec, then moved on to I skipped one thing, Chula Vista Star News for a few years. And then I went to the Daily Californian. I was on there almost 10 years. Did sports writing. I was an editor, did some copy editing. And then I was brought over by a couple of former Daily California people to the Union-Tribune in 1996. So I moved into the sports department from Daily California to the Union-Tribune 24 years ago.
Now, how did the transition go? Because, of course, we know you cover East County now, do a great job on it, but how did the transition go for you to go from sports to covering East County?
Well, that happened in 2010. So I had been at the Union-Tribune for 14 years when finally got a break. An editor in the news department, David Ogle, had asked me to come over to his team because we were going through some cuts at the time, and I was afraid I was going to lose my job. So he offered me a position covering news, and I said, well, if I can cover East County, I'm in. And he said, sure. So that's when it started in 2010, and it was a little difficult for me at first because I wasn't used to covering government. So it's been a learning curve. I'm still learning. It's been 10 years now, but it was difficult because I was used to covering baseball and water polo, gymnastics, football, to covering city council meetings and school board meetings, fire district, water district, a lot of very different things than I had covered my entire, journalism life before then. But I have been learning. I'm getting better. I'm starting to understand things a little finally.
Well, of course, Karen, now that you've got it, pretty much have it all down, the last 2 months with COVID-19, I imagine that has changed how you do things. Talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has affected the way that you do reporting and how reporting is done at the Union-Tribune now.
The story of our lives, Karen.
What's that?
The story of our lives.
Yeah, we're all dealing with it. After the elections in March, was March 3rd was the elections. The last day I was in the office was March 4th, the next day, because my birthday is the following day. And I took that day off. And after that, it was pretty much an edict that nobody's going to go to the office anymore. So I think a few people went into work after a while, but by the second week in March, the governor had started making orders to stay home. And we all kind of just moved all of our needed equipment that we could have, our computers and whatever, and that's it. We all started working from home. My meetings started becoming a regular thing on Zoom. All the meetings that I covered were Zoom or some other online way to do them. So most of the reporters stopped coming in. I think a lot of people were concerned about how we were going to do our jobs, but it's actually all people are going through this. So everybody's sort of pivoted their ways of, getting information out to the reporters. So everyone's dealing with this social distancing and wearing the masks and all this stuff. So we've kind of grown together, the different subjects that we cover and the reporters, to work out ways to interview people this way, like we're doing. Obviously the phone and email, through Facebook. There's all these different ways that we're fortunate that, things have progressed to the point where we can talk to each other and do these things online, or, through other electronic means where, you think if this happened 20 years ago, we would be lost.
Yeah, now, Karen, I just want to ask you one more question, and I want to certainly jump aside because I know Adam and Ramon both have a lot of questions for you. Again, you cover East County. I believe we have 4 actual cities out here: Santee, El Cajon, La Mesa, Lemon Grove, and then the rest of us, like us up in Alpine, we're in the county. Could you guys maybe catch us up on what the top stories are in each city, and maybe what the top stories in the county are right now out here in East County?
Sure. I'd have to think. I've been working on so many stories; they all kind of get mixed up. But obviously, a lot of the things that are going on right now is COVID and how cities are dealing with it financially, trying to help residents and businesses. What's open, what's not open. Some parks are open. City halls are mostly closed or by appointment. So a lot of these kinds of things are throughout all the 4 cities, and county also. Libraries are closed, things like that. I've been covering. There was 2 incidents in Santee that happened earlier this month with some racial attire that was kind of through the city and really the county and maybe the country for a loop. There was a man who wore a Ku Klux Klan hat in a store, and then a couple that wore Nazi symbols on their face masks. So that's out in Santee. I've been covering that. And it's really unfortunate because this is Santee's 40th year as an incorporated city. They were a county until 1980. And so this year they had all these things planned for celebrating the 40th anniversary. And that's been put on the shelf because of COVID, first of all. And then this whole thing with the race stuff. So I feel bad for that city because they really have invested a lot in celebrating everything, being their own city this year, 40th year. So that's been kind of disappointing for them. But they've got some plans about how to kind of bring everything back to normalcy and try to get people to understand that things have changed over the years and they're not this racist town like people have thought that they are. In La Mesa, some of the things that are going on, they have a new, they reopened a park and they have some new ideas that they want to do with a former disc golf course there. A golf course there that also was used as disc golf course that they turned into a public park. So there have been plans. They had closed it for a while to renovate it. And then with COVID again, they closed it again. And just this last week, they reopened it again. That's MacArthur Park, which is over by their community center. So that's what's going on there. Lemon Grove, they and La Mesa are both the only cities in East County that allow medical marijuana. And La Mesa, in fact, is now allowing a recreational or adult use marijuana. So in Lemon Grove, they still are waiting for their first one to open. And what's really nice about the cannabis, whether you're for it or not, is it can help the city make money because it can tax it in certain ways. And so Lemon Grove is in a lot of trouble financially. They've had some issues over the years with finances because they're a very small city, and trying to keep everything together and pay for the needed services has been very challenging for them. So sort of waiting for their first medical marijuana store to open so that they can take advantage of maybe make some extra money that they really need. They had a sales tax measure that didn't pass in the last election, which would have helped them a lot. So they're looking at ways to try to make some money. And in fact, they're in talks right now about what they can do about their budget. It's very serious over there. El Cajon. So what's going on in El Cajon? So let me think. It's been so much that I've covered over there. I'm scrolling through my things. So they, I mean, this may not be an exciting thing, but they're switching their trash collection from Waste Management that they've had for 40 years to EDCO, which is the trash haulers in La Mesa and Lemon Grove. So that was kind of an interesting thing. We had a lot of people that were concerned about, switching after so many years of having the one group. But trash is trash. So I think that the people will probably get over that. So another thing, their annual event that they have there, American Main Street, that was canceled because of COVID. Again, I'm just looking through some of my stories because there's been so many things that I've been covering over there.
Magnolia, maybe? Anything with the Magnolia going on?
Yeah, well, they closed that because of COVID. So basically, until they reopen that, a lot of the things that they had planned for after many years of being shut, I think it was shut for 10 years, reopening it again. They had a few concerts, and then that was the end of it. So I think, that's been disappointing for them too, that they haven't been able to showcase some of the great, things that they were planning to do over there.
Go ahead, Adam.
Adam,
there's, like she said, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, I've told Karen, I talked to Karen about, this. When I used to work down in downtown El Cajon for the old Community Development Corporation, that was the year that they closed the East County Performing Arts Center about 10 years ago. Yeah. And because I was at the last ever performance show that they had there. It was like a radio concert or something like that. But and then it sat obviously abandoned. They were trying to figure that out, and obviously now that they made a deal with Live Nation, which to me I think is a great deal, because you look at the shows that they've been able to get on the docket, and it's such a great building. Now that they've gone in and renovated it, because when I was at Grossmont College, we used to do the sound there. When I took sound engineering classes, we used to do the sound there for the symphony and stuff, and it was a kind of a nightmare because it was such an old building. Yeah. But I just think the city of El Cajon, they're doing a wonderful job. I see Mr. Ortiz, Phil Ortiz, always posting about stuff. Of course, you and
that city is run very well. A lot of cities have pension issues. All the cities all the jurisdictions with paying for all the past employees and current employees, that all the pension is just mounting higher and higher. And El Cajon is doing a really good job with it. I think this COVID thing is going to be a crisis for all of them, because it's just costing them so much money that they're going to have less of, because they have to take care of all the issues, with COVID are happening right now. But El Cajon is really well run. That city's, has done very well for itself despite the rising cost of the pensions.
Well, they've definitely come a long way, because, they have a reputation like Santee, but for a different reason. Nobody wants to go to, for the longest time wanted to go to downtown El Cajon because of all the homeless. And what's that?
It wasn't safe. You didn't feel safe down there. I've had this discussion with Bill Wells many times. When he was growing up in San Diego, we were close to the same age, and we were talking about how nobody wanted to go down there. I mean, there was, adult theaters, and there was, drugs, and, not just the homeless, but there was just a sense of fear of, it wasn't lit well. There was just a lot of things going on there. It was like, you didn't know if you were going to make it, if you went down there. Even by day, you felt unsafe. It's true.
Yeah, and Karen, it's interesting too, because I know back 20 years ago, I was actually covering the city of El Cajon for the Daily Californian. I remember when Mark Lewis became the mayor, he made it a really big deal to clean up downtown. Because I know, like back in the 1970s, when I was going to high school at El Capitan, you had Walker's Spot and all that, and downtown El Cajon was a happening place. Then it went south, but it seemed like when Mark started that 20 years ago, that really got the ball rolling in downtown El Cajon. How is it in downtown El Cajon now? Are things still rolling in the right direction, or how's it going?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's really actually very nice down there. They've got, some restaurants have opened up. They've got a lot of, the lighting's there. It's cleaner. Adam knows from being on the group that was kind of in charge of cleaning it up. They've had a lot of downtown development that has helped just kind of renovate it again. You definitely don't feel unsafe down there.
No.
I think the Magnolia reopening, they got a hotel down there that opened. It's just brought a kind of a new energy to it. There's just been a lot of changes down there that have made it less daunting for people, especially at night. Things that they have there, they've got, before COVID, they had every week they had a band that would come and play on I think it's Friday night. It was dinner and a concert.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, a lot of really fun events, car shows every week that are very big draws for people, like all summer long, even into the fall. So a lot of these things that they've done to bring families down there has been really great, which is why like this event that they canceled this year, this America Main Street, it's very sad because it's a celebration of like how diverse El Cajon is, because they've got a very large Chaldean community. They've got a lot more minorities and different people from areas all over the world that live there now. And so it's a really big melting pot. So this kind of this festival that they had would draw thousands and thousands of people. And there were booths from all the different factions that you could learn about all these different people from all over the world. And so not having that this year is just it's very sad, because this is a celebration of the things that El Cajon has that a lot of other areas don't have. You certainly won't see this kind of stuff in like the coastal areas in North County. I mean, El Cajon is really its own kind of diverse little neighborhood.
Interesting. Karen, can I change subject just for a little bit?
Of course.
I know, of course, your background is sports and all now, and you've been through this right now. It's interesting because, as you know, if the Padres come back, I'll be blessed to be doing sports, the statistics with Fox Sports San Diego, and hopefully we'll be back.
Yes.
But what's going to be interesting now is like after the games, and you went through this issue many years ago with San Diego State, with people going in the locker room and all. Reporters are so used to going to the locker room after the game and all that, but it sounds like what's going to happen is after the game, it's all going to be on Zoom or whatever. Because you have a sports background, how much is that going to change sports reporting? People not being able to go in the locker room anymore and just doing it by Zoom after a game, let's say.
Well, back in the 80s when I was at the Daily Californian, I wasn't allowed to go into the locker room. And it was a very big deal. I had just been about a year or so out of the Daily Aztec working, and I knew all the people there at San Diego State. And so it was a big deal. I didn't make it a big deal because I was fine with the players being brought out from the locker room to talk to me. At the time, there was a lot of publicity around other female sports writers who were not allowed in the locker rooms from different teams in different sports. And I didn't care because I got the best interviews when they brought the players out to me. I got them one-on-one. They were opening up to me better than they did to other people. So for me, I didn't need to go into the locker room to get those interviews. There was really no benefit for me. To me, having a one-on-one conversation was much better for quotes and much better for having somebody feel comfortable sharing things with me versus 7 or 8 people at the same time peppering them with questions. So I think having it on Zoom would offer a little bit of the same more personal touch where you're not actually crowded around, part of, 7 or 8 people with their microphones or pads and paper or whatever in somebody's face. I think it would allow for probably better quotes, I think, where you're not as stressed out because you don't have 5 people asking you questions at the same time, hollering stuff. So I think it could be controlled more maybe through Zoom or through an online method. And I think the quotes you get would probably be better than, just from like a bunch of people asking, shouting out questions at the same time and not really giving an opportunity for the person to answer the question.
Guys, still so humble. Karen, for those that don't know, a pioneer in women's sports, women covering sports. I mean, you think of this week, Karen, probably someone you might have looked up to, Phyllis George, passing away 2 days ago. Kind of the same era, because when sports were coming to kind of the forefront of television, you were watching WGN, you were watching Harry Carey, you were watching those national broadcasts, wanting to be a sports writer, a sportscaster, right then and there. So I'm glad you opened up about that story. Many people know that story about that. You were the unwilling, I won't say unwilling, but a pioneer that it just kind of fell into your lap. I mean, even as people kind of journalists around the country tried to get your story a little bit, you just wanted to do your job. And I think that's what I remember most about that whole whirlwind of events.
I love that you remember that. I love that you remember that. That's exactly what it was. And I remember Ed Graney, now in Las Vegas, the sports writer there, wrote about it. It was a little blurb at the bottom of his story about the football game. It was USC against San Diego State football game. I remember it really well. That was the game that I was, assigned to cover, and that was the game that I couldn't get in. And I didn't want to make it a big deal, but he did. And after that, it was, kind of blew up. And I was very I don't want to say unhappy about it, but it wasn't for me to be, the rah-rah person about it, because to me, I didn't mind. I understand like the greater overall about, being equal access. But for me personally, I knew, the strength for me was to be able to interview somebody one-on-one. And that was kind of like, for my job, that's what I actually preferred. I prefer bring the players out to me. I get them alone and I get to ask them questions and they can open up without, I'm a different kind of interviewer. Like I work better one-on-one with people than I do in a group. And so I was able to kind of get the stories that I needed to from that type of interview versus going into the locker room. So I think some people were unhappy that I didn't make it a bigger deal. But for me to do my job, I was okay with it for that reason alone.
Yeah, and Steve, she might have went to her boss to ask for his advice on how to cope with that situation. I think that's why it might have went a little more smoothly than anticipated.
Are we talking about the late, great Bill Dickens?
Our favorite, the best.
Yes.
I miss him all the time, man. That guy was my mentor forever and a day. I'll never forget him. I would not be where I am today without Bill Dickens. That is for sure.
Sharon, I'm with you on that because, as you know, Bill was my first boss right out of high school, and he taught me so much. It's funny, too, because what you were just talking about doing one-on-ones. I remember when I was at the LA Times San Diego County edition, my boss, Dave Distel, taught me something once, exactly what you're saying. He said, don't be a member of the wolf pack, be a lone wolf. By that, he meant go ahead and get the group interviews and all, but I don't want to read your story every day having the same thing that Ramon, Karen, and Adam are saying. Go out and talk to other people. Go beyond these people that are just in the wolf pack. Become the lone wolf.
That's how it is.
It was great.
And that was my mindset. Like, I wanted to be able to get my own quotes. I don't want to read the same quotes from the person in somebody else's article. I want to have my own special notes, like my own special quotes. Like, I don't need to have the same stuff, the sound bites that everyone else has. I like having something different. That was kind of, and it still is my way. Like, even when I cover city council meetings and things like that, I don't like to always have the same quotes that another reporter from another news outlet's going to have. I'd rather have my own. I mean, sometimes you have to quote directly from a city council meeting, but there are times when I get so much more insight and better quotes when I interview somebody afterwards, or maybe I'd interviewed them before, versus the same ones that everyone else has heard.
Yeah, and so Karen, your resume would have allowed for you to continue your sports writing and probably even more, something greater. But you love this county, you love East County. You talked about the opportunity that was presented to you, to go over to news. Did you think it would be, to me, because I just observing from afar, but I can, see it in your writing, and I could also see it personally on your Facebook post. So how rewarding has it been in this transition, as difficult as it may have been, and it still continues to be today? Did you ever think that when we were hanging out, covering our games, whether it be the preps or the pros, that you'd be having such a rewarding career in reaching out to people you probably thought you'd never come across in your life? You've impacted thousands of people with your writing, with your investigative reporting, and helping people find their way in life. I mean, it has to be satisfying to a certain degree, as difficult as the transition was.
Well, Adam, you okay there?
Yeah.
No COVID allowed. It's very rewarding. I love my job. I think anybody who knows me or even follows me on Facebook will, attest to that. I love what I do. I get to cover some amazing stories. Some of them are really difficult on me emotionally, but a lot of them have a big payoff. And I hope that I change or help somebody with something by what I give them some information, or maybe turn them on to something new that they didn't know about. I'm thinking about a story I wrote a few weeks ago. I mean, I love animals, and I love writing stories about happy endings with animals that are, people have a good, something positive to take from it. And I covered a horse sanctuary out in Guatai or Descanso, and they just got a cow and a couple of ponies and a burro, I think. And I got to go out even with my mask on and cover the animals out there that have been rescued and have a new home. Some people didn't even know that this place exists out in Guatai. And so a lot of these far off places and far off things that people don't know about, I like to be the one to bring that information out to them. A lot of the things that we can see on a website, city council meetings are on there now because of the, COVID, and people can see these meetings. But before, I was sometimes the only voice that people would have if they couldn't get to a meeting, if it was during the day or they had something to do at night, they couldn't get to a meeting. They count on me to bring them that information about what happened at the meeting or what was decided on at the some event or something, that I am the eyes and ears for them. And I take that really seriously. I really care about what I'm writing about. I care about all the cities and the county areas that I cover. I have my veterinarians in one of the cities, my storage units in another one of my cities. It's like all these things that I have, I'm actually invested in the places that I cover. So I care about what goes on. I care if the roads are getting fixed. I care if they're having a budget issue. All these things are important to me. I care that the people get along with each other. And, the things that make each city unique and the county parts of it unique are important. And I like to explain that to the readers so that they can appreciate it. I think East County has a little bit of a, not negative connotation, but, people kind of use it as an afterthought. Everybody's like, oh, there's La Jolla and there's, Encinitas and, even like in North County, Fallbrook, El Cajon and these kinds of places, Santee, Lemon Grove, La Mesa, even the county areas, they sort of are like an afterthought for people. And I like to bring the information to somebody who maybe lives in Carlsbad, who doesn't realize that there's something really cool going on in Lakeside. Give the information to somebody that doesn't understand what happens out in Hamul. These are part of the whole county. And I want people to understand that, and get to know the areas that are important to people like you and me, us, that are, in these areas, that know the beauty, that know the different things that make all these places unique. And I like to have the voice. I like to be the voice to share that kind of information with people. So I really take it to heart and try to do the best that I can.
Now, Karen, the three of us know how to get in touch with you, obviously. But let's say I'm somebody out in Lakeside where I grew up, and I've got a story idea. Yeah. How do I approach you? What do I do if I don't know you?
Email me. That's probably the best thing. I check my email all the time, starting at about 6:30 in the morning. Should I say my email out loud, or because that would be the best way? So it's Karen, Karen, Pearlman, Pearlman at sduniontribune.com. Karen.Pearlman at sduniontribune.com. That's the easiest way. You can get on the Union Tribune's website, and there should be a link at the bottom of all my stories and on my page that has my picture and a little bit of my background. You could probably click. I think there's something on there that people can email me directly, but that's the best way to find me.
To echo what Dean Velasco, and we all know Dean, great proprietor, business owner here in Santee.
Yes.
He saying that you have the great ability to write fair and interesting articles on obviously what's going on, and also as has happened in Santee. I concur with that because like you said, with the whole thing that's happened in Santee with the knuckleheads the last couple weeks, the whole moniker Clan T and everything just comes back up, and everything. And you wrote that story. You wrote those stories with such, non-bias and non-agenda. And also, unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, our good friend, but with the passing of our good friend Buddy Rabaya.
Yes.
Your story was so, heartwarming, and it struck chords with people.
Good. That's good. I was those kinds of stories are hard for me to write when things are sad. So I know that people need the information, and I want to share it in a way that will grab their attention, but also will not take advantage of that. I try to be really fair when I write stories, but it's hard. Obituaries are a little different. I wrote our friend Bill Dickens's obituary. I've written a couple other ones over the years of friends that have passed away, and those are very hard on me emotionally. Like, once I write those, I need a few hours to kind of collect my thoughts before I go on to do something else, because those are very difficult for me. But even the incidents that happened in Santee, writing that very long story that ran on the front, which was an honor for me to be on the front page, that took a lot out of me too, because it's hard to see a city that's come so far in trying to shake these stereotypes that have kind of dogged it for years. It takes a lot out of me to rehash a lot of the things from the past that are they're trying to move away from. And I don't want to ignore it, but it's hard to give that attention, because I don't want people to think that that's how it is over there. Because while there are issues, there's issues everywhere across the world. I mean, there's issues of this kind of stuff. But the fact that, this city in particular has had it bad reputation-wise, and they've come so far, to have it come back like that is just, it was heartbreaking for me, actually. It was very sad. So it was hard to be, it's not hard to be objective, but it was hard to not let my emotions kind of get the best of me. And I have an excellent editor. Her name's Tarsi Connors, and she's the best editor I've had. And I've had a lot of editors over the years, but she helps me get my thoughts together and kind of stay within myself. And if I get too far out on the ledge, she brings me back in.
Interesting. Karen, it's interesting what you're saying too now about having to be heartfelt and all, because I know, like, for instance, as you know, I was at San Diego State for 16 years in media relations. When I first started there, San Diego State had a reputation as a party school, and on the outside people are like, yeah, but on the inside, it was just so hard to get rid of that reputation. And then when a fraternity or a sorority does something, then it all it's ugly head again. I think sometimes people need to realize, like you're talking about Santee, and I'll just be flat out honest. It was three people in Santee. Well, a week and a half ago, I went to a family gathering in Santee with fewer than 10 people. 3 of the people there were from Vietnam. They've lived in Santee for a long time, 3 sisters, and they love it there. So the sad thing is that you can have 3 kooks give Santee that reputation again when you talk to the people. And you had the commentary the other day in the paper, too, for the lady that lives in Santee who grew up there. It's just so sad when a couple people can just ruin the reputation for everybody else.
It's true. And, I think, like I said, racism is everywhere. And just bringing it out in the open in a place like Santee, where it's already had such a fight with it, it just made me really sad. I wouldn't want that to happen in any city, but especially that one. It was just really, it was disappointing, especially when I know so many people, minorities that live there, that don't have any problems. I think that there was problems in the past, but they've really come a long way, and it's so diverse now. It's just, I mean, it's a different place than it used to be, by far.
Now, Karen, speaking of the city of Santee, or all the cities now that you cover, whether it be them or Lemon Grove, La Mesa, El Cajon, how has your reporting had to change recently? Because I know it used to be you could just sit in on a council meeting and all. I would imagine now you're maybe doing it by Zoom. And how does that change what you do as a reporter?
It's pretty much the same thing. I have to show up on time. I want to be part of the meeting from the beginning. So I'd like to get there at the start and log in and They let you in. You have to have a password because you don't want any weird stuff happening. Like you've heard of people breaking into these Zoom meetings and doing weird stuff. So they're making sure that everybody who's there is supposed to be there. Taking notes same way. I use my computer to take notes. I have like a notepad, and then I'm finished. Get together a story, or depending on what it is, if it needs to be timely and I have to do it right then and there, or I can sleep on it for a night or whatever. I'll follow up with phone calls if I need to, or if I need a PowerPoint presentation sent to me, I'll ask the city clerk from one of the cities to email that to me. And, then I write my stories the same. The hard thing is I don't have a city council person to grab after the meeting saying, hey, can we talk about this or that?
Yeah.
But I've been doing it for so long that I pretty much can reach out to almost any of them. I have fairly good relationships with all the city council people and the mayors. That I can reach out to them that evening or the next morning, or by email or phone or text, and follow up and say, hey, I had a question about this. Can we talk about that? And most of the time they're able to get back to me with what I need to follow up on stuff from the meeting. But it was kind of nice to have them right then and there afterwards, that I could just, talk to them in person. And it's tough because part of going to the meetings is being with the other people, the citizens that are there in the audience, and listening to them. And, sometimes they would approach me after a meeting. So a lot of stories that I got were from the people that were at meetings that would say, hey, do you have a minute? Can I talk to you about this or that? Or they hand me a card, business card or whatever. And it would be a story to follow up on. Well, I don't have that anymore. So now more than ever, I depend on people to email me with story ideas, or some people get me on Facebook and send me story ideas, or tag me in something and say, hey, what do you think about that? So I am getting stories that way, but I sort of miss it's like camaraderie, like with sports. You had people that your usual suspects that would be at your meetings that you'd sit with, or they come up to you after the meeting. Sometimes they would drop off a book or something, or a note to me. I miss the seeing the police chief in person, and I get a lot of stories that way. So that's kind of one thing I think that is missing. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. You cover the meetings, take your notes, and you try to write a good story from what you've heard.
Guys, our KBP, from hanging out with her on Friday nights, and now she's got every mayor and congressman in her DMs. Okay?
Really
I miss those Friday nights. Those are like so amazing.
What's funny, when you were working at the Union-Tribune, because I used to work for Dave Gross doing at Santana, doing all the football stats and stuff, and I called and you answered the phone one Friday night, and I was like, wait a minute, I know you. I called him, obviously called in our score and gave you all the information and everything.
Yeah.
But,
those were great times.
Karen, what were some of the biggest sports? We know. Hey, look, you've covered some great stories on your news beat. We know when it's one that means it's some specialty when you kind of share it on your personal timeline. And obviously, we talk COVID-19. It's the story of everyone's lifetime here. I mean, even though we've just talked about it on our show, we have to take it seriously because that's the way we've covered it. We've had our personal conversation, Steve, Adam, and I. But go back a little bit. What were some of the biggest sports stories that you think you covered? If you remember any monumental, any great things, maybe some sorrowful things. Think of maybe Matt LaChapa.
Yeah, that was a great story. I got to cover him when he was in high school. It's a very sad what happened in the end with him. But yeah, that was covering him was awesome. I have the best, memories of covering a lot of really cool athletes over the years that made it to the pros. I remember Bill Dickens used to love when, the kids that he covered made it to the pros, and then he was covering their children and I think some of their grandchildren. I'll tell you, anytime I cover something with Bill Walton is a happy day for me because I just, he's like Mr. La Mesa. He always says, I'm Billy from La Mesa. Like, it's like his thing. And I just get so much joy out of that because he's so proud of being from La Mesa. So anytime that, we have a conversation, I get to see him and talk to him. I learned something new from him. He's got an incredible memory. He's just a really cool guy. And so I think anytime I get to cover stuff with him in there, it's pretty special to me. You know, I have great memories of covering Grossmont College sports over the years. Baseball games with Ed Olson. Just like, I mean, he was
name dropping those coaches.
I played for him in high school.
I repeat some of the quotes that he would give me.
Oh, I know the quotes, Karen. Trust me.
You know, I have great memories of covering it. You know, baseball is my favorite sport because I grew up in Chicago as a Cubs fan. I used to go to Wrigley Field. Every once in a while, I would ditch school with friends. We'd hop on the L and go down to Wrigley Field and watch a game in the bleachers. You know, back when it was 50 cents because I'm old. But like just stuff that baseball games that I covered when I was not much older than the kids that I was covering. When I was at the Star News in Chula Vista, I think I was maybe, I don't know, 19, 20. And it was so much fun to sit and like still be part of sports and still be part of like the teams that I was covering. I had so much fun. The coaches all treated me really well. I just had a lot of fun covering like the football games on Friday nights. Very stressful because, you know, you were doing your own stats, you know, you're taking notes and you'd have to come back to the paper and have the story done in like 15 minutes. And
Bill would say, how does this guy have 2 punts for -7 yards?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Really, like, I just remember being so on the edge. But there's something about being on deadline that, I don't know, for me, it brought out the best in some of the things that I got to write about. Like, I was under pressure and I felt, even that way now, like if I know I have to write a story after a council meeting and it's due that night, I mean, there's just something about the adrenaline rush that it brings me back to covering those football games that, you know, be boom, 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 you know, get everybody's stats added up, you know, and have everything ready to go. The quarterback, you know, however many passes, interceptions, yards, the running backs, how much, you know, total yardage, like, and trying to get defensive stats and get everything down and into a story in like 15 minutes. There was just something like those. I mean, those are really special to me. There's not really one standout game. I covered a lot of really interesting players over the years, a lot of really interesting games. If I sat and had time to really think about it, I could probably come up with something special, but just being out there among the kids and the coaches, the parents, and I just loved the energy that was around that. And there are times when I really miss that stuff because those were very memorable times for me. I cut my chops, as they say, doing a lot of those stories and being. I had a great editor, you know, Bill Dickens was amazing. So being edited pretty strongly to learn, you know, what was good and what was not good and what was the right way to get information out and what was not the right way to get information out.
It's funny you say that. You know, you think of everything that Bill did and tried to, you know, press into your mind. And I'm thinking of you and the new, you know, I think of sometimes how much I learned sitting just next to Joe Moreland.
Right.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Don't put your foot on her desk, you mean?
Right.
Don't put your foot on the desk. That's a start. She was great. She was up there at the Alpine Chamber until recently, you know.
Yes, she was my connection to Alpine for a long time. She always sent me stuff from the Alpine Mountain Empire. Don't forget they're together with Mountain Empire Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, she was great. Like I remember being in awe of her, like just writing story after story, like the most sad, grim stories of, you know, mayhem and death and everything. And she could sit there and not be emotionally involved with it. Like I was like, I could never do that. I mean, I have learned to do it now, but it's like I was so always impressed with her demeanor, taking stories about murders and really bad crimes and just like being able to cover it without emotional, you know, connection.
Yeah, I kind of meant just like her phone work. You know, I mean, you'd sit there and learn so much from her. I mean, I'm trying to make it applicable to like covering some Little League games or something, but I'm just hammering these phones like Joe Moreland.
Yeah, that was
your relation. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say your relationship with not even just the players but the coaches. You know, you're known by a lot of the coaches because obviously, I'm like a couple of you guys, good friends with Coach Olson. He still lives in Santee in that same old house.
Wow.
He's been there for 900 years, Adam. I was on his first team
all
in
these
El Cap.
coaches out here, Karen, they have
1972, first
so
team in El
much.
Cap. He ain't moved.
Yeah, both
All
him
these
and-
coaches have so much admiration for you out here, no doubt about it.
Both him and Doug Coffin still
Wow.
talk about,
Nice.
still give high praise it whenever, like, especially when I was talking to Olson a couple weeks ago, I was just checking in on him to see how he was doing.
Nice.
And we were talking, and your name, I brought up your name, and it was like, oh my gosh, I love her, and
that's very nice.
Just the fact that it's because it's been so long since obviously you've been on the sports beat, that these coaches and stuff still have high admiration.
I run into them from here and there, like Jerry Schneep was the CIF commissioner after a while. I mean, we all remember him when he coached baseball at Helix.
Yep.
Larry Odewalt, he's over at Santana now. A lot of these people, Doug Coffin, I think he's still at Santana. I run into them here and there. It's just like so cool. Jeff Meredith, I would run into. He was the coach at Grossmont High School. A lot of these coaches have moved on into either education or some kind of administration at the schools. So who was it? Tom Fordham from Granite Hills, lefty baseball player. I ran into him at Grossmont High School. Dan Barnes is the principal at Grossmont, he was a football player. I'm so, like, to me, they're always like 15. And I always tell them that. I'm like, how could you be like, you've got kids that are in high school now. How could you be when you're still 15 to me, So I tease them a lot when I see them. But like, those were such precious moments for me to cover these kids and to see them now. And they've got kids of their own, and just, it's great. And thank you for telling me that, Adam. That makes me really happy, because I actually think about Ed Olson. I don't live too far from Grossmont College, so I always wonder how he's doing. I'm glad he's well. So please tell him I said hello.
Well, I'll tell you what, Karen, I learned my lesson. I want to say something about Friday Night Football, but Ed Olson was my coach at El Cap. When he came out in 1972, his first year at El Cap, we had a Winter League doubleheader against Ramona, and the seniors played the first game, juniors played the second game. So I was among the juniors. So the first game, we're all sitting on the bench, messing around like high school kids do. Our pitcher walks the first batter, and all of us on the bench are Ed Olson, you can't walk people, you can't. And you know what he said? It caught our attention, and we respected the man, and he was a great coach. But something I wanted to say too, Karen, going back to Friday Night Football, it's just nothing like, personally, we did it on Channel 4 San Diego till 2011. Hadn't done a high school game, and then in 2018, Rich Herrera calls from 97.3 The Fan and says, would you be interested in doing high school football? I'm like, oh my gosh, because there's nothing like the Friday nights. I'll give you one example. We all know Pedro Gomez, who's on ESPN now. He's covered all the big stories. I run into him about once a year at a Padre game, and you know what the first thing Pedro will always say to me? What's up with Chula Vista High? I heard George Normasoga retired. Here's Pedro, this famous ESPN guy. Yeah, when we get together, we don't say a word about the Padres and the Giants. We talk about San Diego County Friday Night Football. And that's a guy from ESPN who's famous.
Jim Trotter?
Yeah, Jim of the NFL Network now,
So, I was covering high school stuff. I remember Jim and I sitting together at Santana High School covering a baseball game years ago. And I'm sure if we got together, like, we would be talking the same thing, because these are the things that really, bound us together. Like, we were all covering similar, sports and the athletes of those times. And those were really strong memories. And just, they're just, I'm so grateful that I have that, because those are really precious to me. They really are important in how I've come along all these years with the different sports that I got to cover, and just dealing with personalities of the different coaches, and everybody kind of had just like similar in politics. Everyone's got their own agenda. The story that they want you to write, and then you get to write the story that you think that people need to know. So in that way, it was a good stomping grounds for me to get my start with all that high school stuff. It was great.
Yeah, but as much success as Karen has had since switching over to news, I just can't help but think what might have been for the glory of Karen's sports writing career and where it would have led her. I just want Karen, did 2016 erase all the bad memories of 1984 for your Chicago Cubs?
Yes. I have to say that was a very exciting year, and that was so much fun to watch that World Series, probably the greatest World Series ever. Like, even if you're not a Cubs fan, like, how is that World Series not the best one there ever was? That Game 7 was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Was it not?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now, Karen, don't get mad at me, but as you know, in 1984, I was working for the LA Times, so I traveled, and I was in Chicago when the Padres, of course, they did lose the 2 in Chicago, and sorry, they beat the Cubs with 3 games out here. Did you ever hear the song, Go Cubs Go, Go Cubs Go, Hey Chicago, what do you say, the Cubs are going to win? It drove me nuts. The 3 days we were there during the National League playoffs, heard that 10,000 times. It was just amazing. You would know, and unless you've been to a Cubs game, but you've been to a lot more than I have, there's just nothing like it.
Yeah, no, Wrigley Field is really special. I have to say I love Petco Park because it's got that kind of same very small vibe, like small ballpark vibe that I loved so much about Wrigley Field. But there's nothing like being in Wrigley Field. I haven't been there in many years. It's changed a lot since I was there last, but loved going there. I would sit in the bleachers and with my friends. It was a very special ballpark. It was just fun. And it was, there's no parking around there. So it wasn't, it wasn't like you pulled into a big parking lot like we had at Petco. They've got the Lexus lot, or they had the big one when they were at the Murph. In Chicago, you got there by public transportation, because if you drove, you had to pay somebody to park on their grass or in their driveway because there's like no parking over there. And it just made it really special, like very, I don't know, everyone getting together on the L on the way there, and depending on if they won or lost, how the vibe was on the way home. Everyone's excited, and there's like a high energy if they won, and everyone's kind of bummed out. No one's talking when they lost. It's funny, whenever I'm on the trolley, which is not that often, but when I'm on the trolley, I always go back to how it felt when being on the L, because it was like the way the people reacted with each other, and it was just like a really fun vibe. So, even when I took the trolley after Padres games, it was similar to that. It reminded me, when they would win, people get all excited. And then when they lost, you'd be on the trolley and everybody would be kind of nobody's talking. It was kind of the same thing. But Chicago fans are really different, I have to say. It's a lot of history over there. And unlike San Diego, which has a lot of transplants, of which I'm one, the people in Chicago, that's like your parents were there, your grandparents were there. So you have a lot of history and memories that get passed along to you by your relatives that were also big sports fans over the years.
Well, Karen, just by you talking about Chicago brings back a great memory, because you asked earlier, memorable stories. I'll never forget one of the most memorable stories I was blessed to do. Okay, in October 1984, I was there when the Padres played the Cubs. 4 months later, in February, I was there for a league soccer game. The soccer's against Chicago, but my boss, Dave Distel, had me do a story. It was one of the most fun stories I ever did. He said, "Hey, go to the Billy Goat Tavern, go to Murphy's." He said, go those places around Wrigley and find out what it's like. 4 months after the Padres had beaten the Cubs, those people were still in mourning. I mean, I went in and started asking the questions. They were just like, oh my gosh, don't ask. It was just amazing.
The mourning lasted until 2016, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
My dad, unfortunately, my dad died in 2013, so he didn't get to see it. So maybe from up there he saw it, but it was like one of the greatest disappointments of his life was the fact that he didn't get to see anything like that during his lifetime, I'm sure. Huge Cubs fan.
Yeah, and they went, 108 years. I'm just wondering, do you think the Padres will ever win a World Series within their first 108 years? I don't know.
I'll tell you,
at least before I die.
It would be nice. And also, by the way, I would like the Padres to play this year that we could see them. I mean, I am so jonesing to go to a game. It's like so hard. I miss concerts too, like all these things that are part of, all of our lives, are just, I pine for them. I mean, I miss being able to, just say, hey, let's go to the game with a friend, or let's go to the show, or, some concert like the Magnolia. It's just like heartbreaking now. I miss all these things so much.
Karen, right now, the interesting thing, the battle between the owners and the players, and we kind of touched on it last week, but maybe we could touch on it a little more with Karen, someone who knows pretty well, I'd say, or at least has interacted with him in the past. The most important person in Major League Baseball right now is from the East County, Tony Clark, head of the Players Association. Karen, do you think that maybe we're going to be held back by the players' inability to come to an agreement with these owners? Nobody wants to see any kind of labor strife over this in the middle of a global pandemic,
right?
Because they can't agree how much money they're going to get right now.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's why I worry about that too. I don't know what they're going to do about that. I'm so worried about everybody surviving this thing right now. Just being able to come out of it with least amount of deaths as possible, and least amount of health issues. Like, that's like my number one concern right now, is taking care of everybody.
Karen, then let me ask you a serious question then about that, because you do have the ear. You guys laughed at me, but you do have the ear of the mayors and certain congressmen from around the area. Do you think that politicians are feeling a little bit of pressure to help the public kind of force their own coming out into the community now? We haven't really done anything as far as, only thing we've done is flatten the curve. I think we've done that. Do you think they're just feeling pressure that we've got to loosen these restrictions, take this little chance, this little glimmer, this sliver of opportunity that says maybe we won't overload our hospitals, and our politicians taking chances with their own success, their own future success in holding office in this crucial time?
You know what? I think, as you may know, all my cities are not strong mayors. So the city managers actually run the cities, and the mayors are the elected officials. Unlike in the city of San Diego, where the mayor is also the city manager, they call that a strong mayor. So I would say that the mayor and the city council for all of my cities are very anxious to have all the businesses reopened, because they know that the sales tax is such an important part of how they make money over there. Not just property tax, sales tax is huge, and they're all losing because these businesses are closed. However, I think the number one thing that all the city officials are worried about, both elected and the staff members, is you preserving life for these people, and your number one job as an elected official, especially, is to protect your citizens. And I think being careful with this and going slowly and following the county and statewide mandates is really important, because above the businesses, which are very important, is human life. So I think they're being cautious and smart about going about their way. I know that in Santee, they've got a blue ribbon committee that was together with business people and some others in the community, talking about what it will look like. Not opening up yet, but what it will look like when they are given the green light. So to prepare businesses for when that happens, to prepare for social distancing when people walk into your business. And to make sure that people are, given this much opportunity to stay well through this. I would think we were talking a little earlier. I'm a little concerned about the casinos opening early because the tribal government works on their own governance level. So having those places open worries me a little bit too, because I'm not sure how much social distancing can be watched by the people who are there, because there's a lot of other things that people on the reservations and in the casinos have to watch. So to me, I think the mayors and the city council people are being careful as they can to protect the lives of their residents, and to make sure that the businesses can get some of the things that they need financially to help them out.
Gosh, well, Karen, you know what? Believe it or not, our hour has gone so quickly tonight. We really, really appreciate you being with us. And can we ask you a favor that you could come back again and catch up with us again? We'd love to have you again.
I'm ready to come back anytime you guys want me. I'd be honored again to be part of your. This is a great job. An honor to be part of it.
Well, Karen Pearlman of the San Diego Union-Tribune, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And as always, thank you to Adam Paul from EC Preps for being with us. And I thank Ramon Scott of EastCountySports.com for being with us, because Ramon, I have no idea how you hook us up for this show, but you do it every week. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah.
All right. For your host, Steve Dolan, Adam Paul, Karen Pearlman. So great to see you. Can't wait to do it again. I'm Ramon Scott. Thank you for joining us.
Good night.